Does the name Mary Edwards Walker ring a bell? Well, that name popped out of our guest's brain as a filler at the end of a 1970s newspaper article. And who was this woman? She's a woman who started a curiosity that continued for over 30 years. See, I've got an author I'd like you to meet, because that name taught today's author how to follow similar leads from clippings and shaping her writing process. Stick around, because we're going to learn more about this book and the writing process.
Welcome to A Book Finds You podcast. This week's guest is Frances Altman. Join us as she shares the inspiration behind her book, along with her writing process, routines, and challenges. And now, here's your host, best-selling author, Rob Jolles.
Today's guest, Frances Altman, has been writing in the communications field since the 1960s. Writing has been both a career tool and a hobby, now turned therapy, at the ripe age of 87. Her 10th book, Destiny's Daughter, was published this year by Apprentice House Press and caps a long career in media. Happy to have you with us, so welcome to the show, Fran.
Rod, I'm delighted to be with you because I can see that we both enjoy writing and talking about our favorite topics. So there's so many things that is rapidly changing in the industry. So you need to keep up to date and right up to the minute almost with what's happening and how you can shape your writing to fit in with the industry.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the big word, Fran. We got to keep evolving. I see people who see me not just as a writer, but in business. And they go, "You're doing this now? You're doing a podcast?" Yeah, because we're evolving, because that's what we do, particularly as writers. So let me start with this question for you. The show's called A Book Finds You. All right. How did Destiny's Daughter find you? Because I know you didn't find it. It probably tapped you on the shoulder. How did it happen?
Well, I was looking for a woman to write about. I had already had 4 books published about men, biographies about men for Brings Press. And I was looking for a 4th one to submit. And I saw this clip. This was in the linotype days, where at the end of the article, they would put some kind of a sentence or a "did you know" or whatever question. So there was the name Mary Edwards Walker. So I thought, aha, that's a good name. I started looking her up. Couldn't find very much about her. So I kept hunting and finally wrote an article about her. And by the time that I had finished and sold the article, my publisher had folded. So I put my information in my folder and went on with my daily work, which, by the way, at that time was with small newspapers in the Chicago area. And then as I kept going through the years, I kept running into bits and pieces about her, and that reinvigorated my interest. So anyway, about 30 years later, I finally got I did write the book for a middle grade, but then during COVID, would you believe, I took it out and decided it was more for adults. So I finished it up, and fortunately, or almost magically, Apprentice House Press accepted it.
Well, you just taught us a couple lessons there. And one I just want to lean on. I want people to hear that sometimes we put a book aside for a little bit and we let it rest a little. I got to tell you, friend, that's a tough one for writers because we're caught. It's a catch-22. We don't want to give up. We don't want to give up when the going gets tough. And yet we also have to listen to that voice that says, maybe it's time for just a pause. What I really appreciate about your story, and I want people to understand that, is it's a pause and nothing more. And then we jump back. And so you were able to get at it. I just think that's a great lesson for people to hear.
Well, it certainly is, because so many people, you fall in love with with a story and you want to keep writing on it, and yet you're not being productive about it, or it's not going the right way. So I have several things put on the shelf. And, they're halfway written, but I do believe that almost everything that you write really has to go through a couple, at least, of rewritings and redirection and thought. So that takes about a couple of years almost from many people and myself to develop something that you want to publish.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally, but you can see that tough part because, I don't want to coach people and say, hey, when it gets a little tough, leave it alone. How many people do both of us know, Fran, who've started five different books and never, and are still kind of rehashing the first chapter and editing and re-editing? That's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about almost a piece of artwork that just isn't quite complete, and grinding and obsessing on it is actually not going to help complete it. And that's the voice, but it's a tricky one.
Yes, yes, that's you're exactly right there. And one of the things that I've discovered in doing so many Zoom programs with writers is, or like writers clubs, like Maryland writers, is that there are two types of really people who are writing or think about writing. Those are the people who are really involved in writing and they're dedicated to coming home after their daytime job and they're doing working on their manuscript at all different times. And then there's the person who keeps saying, well, tell me how to write.
Right.
And there's no real way that you can actually tell a person other than put your pencil down and start writing about something, right? About the birds and bees or the trees or whatever. It's You really keep meeting two kinds of people that it just seems like so many people consider writing a book or even writing an article uh, something miraculous, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it puts
That's an
you,
interesting point you're making because it's almost like saying, tell me how to speak. Well,
yes,
well,
yes,
you have your own.
exactly.
Basically, don't be afraid of your voice.
That's
I've
it.
never met a person as a professional speaker and trained speakers. I've never met a human being who said, I like my voice. And yet, I'm on this pilgrimage practically to get people to trust your voice a little bit. Nobody can imitate that voice better than you can, and nobody can even when we say, "But I have this kind of nutty way of writing." Beautiful, that's your voice. You don't need to change it. And other people are going to love the sound of that. They don't like the sound of their voice, but
Well,
let's not give up on the voice that we have.
correct. And I've really enjoyed writing because I vary between different types. When I first started out in the newspaper business, I was writing for newspapers and also at the same time writing for children. And so that gives you a back and forth type of thing. When you're tired of doing one thing, you can switch over and do the other. And I still like flash fiction now has become sort of a challenge for me because it's a short piece of writing that you can get into. You can re-edit it several times. And that's what most things need. You have to know when to stop, how many more times you need to edit it, and also you need to know when to stop, when to
Right.
let go of your piece.
Well, Fran, let's stay there. When do you know when to stop?
But that's a good question. A very good question.
Fran, you're
I
going to need to drink
well,
some tea on that one. Let's
after
hear it.
really about three editings, I feel that I'm kind of there. I also feel that if particularly if you're writing a novel versus writing just a short story or a flash fiction, you need some other critique and some other help. So I really feel that writers, and most of them do have one or two types of critiquing methods that will look over your piece and tell you the good and bad points about it.
Right.
But really, re-editing, I don't know anyone who's ever been successful in sending something out, getting it published immediately with the first draft.
Yeah.
Unless that would be a PR person where you're writing a jingle or something like that, you know.
Yeah. And yet, at the same time, this is really an interesting point. I'm glad we're kind of slowing down on this one. We can go the other way. And I've seen people, almost actors, people that will do something and they'll say it a few times. They say it enough where they think it's getting stale, but the audience has never heard it, or the audience keeps changing. That's where I think we need not necessarily a support group, but others around us that we can trust so that we don't just keep editing and re-editing and re-editing and re-editing because we've read it too many times and well, it looks stale. Of course it does. You read it 16 times already. Let
You
somebody
memorize.
else read it. Ask them if it sounds stale. Somebody you trust. But we need others that we can trust because I think our own voice will fool us occasionally and go, just because it's tired of hearing it, maybe it's not so good anymore.
That you're right. As I say, you need to know. And I think if you're have published before, your inner voice sort of tells you,
Yeah.
yeah, you can let go of this just a little bit maybe and get other people's opinions.
Good.
Something
Good.
else
Good.
that's happening now is that you need, as a writer, sometimes you fall in love with a topic that really doesn't fit the market.
Mm.
And I've noticed now in monitoring my own book for the past 10 months that the readers are changing somewhat. So many self-help and health topics are now appealing to people, even in nonfiction, in fiction form. And you're not finding a lot of trilogies and the heavier, lengthier books, except maybe Streisand's 900-page book. But most books today seem to be running. Oh, when they get to the uh, for 50,000 words, then you begin to slow down. We're making our stories more compact, I think.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I can tell you that my publisher, now it's a bit, I write business books,
Right.
but the first book I ever wrote was about 120,000 words. And I'm glad you're using words, by the way. I want people to hear that, what Fran said. Sometimes when people come to you with a page count, I don't know page counts. I don't know whether you're double spacing. I don't know whether you got larger fonts, but word counts don't lie. Word counts are really the accurate way of measuring a manuscript. So good on you for bringing that up. And I like the number 50,000. That seems to be about the ballpark these days. If you're trying to translate that into page numbers, what are we, Fran? Maybe 160. I've sort of looked it over, and that's probably where we're at. Maybe even 150. So in a sense, let's look at that as half full. Good news, writers. We don't need to write War and Peace anymore. Nobody's looking for it. We have a society that wants it a little bit quicker and a little bit faster. And quite frankly, the last one that I wrote brought it in at 50, and he said it's really good. Now I want it at 40. I had to get 10,000 words out of it at 50. So slow down on those words. Watch your word count and pace yourself a little bit. Great lesson from Fran here. Hey, Fran, I read this, but I wanted you to share it with others. When did you first call yourself a writer?
Well, I've thought about that a lot because that
Yeah,
question is asked by many people.
right.
I began writing and tinkering around with writing when I was probably a teenager and writing reports for high school. At that level, I wouldn't exactly call you a writer. I sort of gauged myself when I sold my first piece. I called myself a writer, but writer is sort of a synonym. We call journalists the people that work for newspapers, and then we have authors, and then we have playwrights, and all of these people are really writers when you get right down to it. So I think that we have labeled different types of not occupations, but different kinds of styles as fiction writers, nonfiction writers, biographers. All of those are names that are synonymous with writing. So anytime I really feel that maybe when you've had even one piece published, you can call yourself a writer. Maybe you don't want to do that to other people, but I think you need that as your own support system. I am a writer. I've actually sold something.
Right,
Other
right.
people are reading it. So that's sort of my ballpark opinion of
Yeah,
the word writers.
right. It's up for grabs, folks. I'll tell you what somebody told me, Fran, once, and it's a little different, but like I said, everybody has their own definition for this. Somebody came to me once and said, just for authors now, they said, when you write your first book, you're an author. When you write your second book, you're a writer. And in a sense, you were nibbling around that because you're like, basically, you've got to get a volume going to be a writer. If you've written one book, and by the way, huge congratulations, you're an author, by golly. When you can repeat it, you become a writer. Now, that was one person's opinion. But I've always sat on that and went, okay, so whenever I see authors, they go, it's first book. I go, well, you're an author. I need another one. I'll call you a writer.
Well, I wonder what we would call there are several ladies that, well, maybe many, many more, but anyway, people who write these trilogies and so forth have written as many as 40 books. So
Yeah, yeah.
they're writing a book a year practically. So what do you call those
I
people?
call them nutballs. I don't know. Uh, I, yeah, I had a guy on my podcast yesterday who wrote 60 books. And I
Oh
really
my
thought,
goodness.
what else do you do? Because, Fran, you know what goes into writing a book. I don't know how you get 60 of them going, but quite frankly, I worry about the quality of 60. I like
Well,
our numbers, you
yeah.
and me.
I'm not going to even get into that question because I know that some of the things I've written along the line through the years have not been as good as they could be. And I say that about marketing manuals. When
Hmm.
after my newspaper venture sort of ended, I went into marketing and I was working for a company called the National Hot Dog and Sausage Council. So went into a completely different industry. And that reminds me that I really don't know too many people who make a living completely from writing like books. Most of the people that I know are writing on the side and they're maybe working in the newspaper business or some media or whatever. They may be writing all the time, but they're not exactly making a fortune from writing books, which leads you into whether you're going to spend a lot of time trying to find a publisher or going into the world of indie writing. That's an
Right.
entirely different industry that you have to learn all about it. And after I retired, I did do two books through the indie process using Amazon and learning all about how to do it on your computer and just re-educating yourself. So I admire people who also take that next challenge and go into writing, publishing their own books,
Yeah.
which, as I say, is a completely another chapter for another day.
Yeah, no, but that's a new world. And let's not forget, we've got, the ones in the middle, which are the hybrids. So we've got
Correct.
conventional, we've
Which is
got
kind of
hybrid,
how
we've
I
got
can,
self.
yeah, I
Yeah.
consider myself that because I enjoy helping people. Well, and here again, the publishing industry has changed so much within the indie business.
Yeah.
Who's doing it, and so many small presses available that you really have to. It's not just writing your book; you have to learn all about what's good for you to follow, and after you put the end on the end of your book, you have to discover what you should be doing next.
Yeah. Yeah. And touching back on a point you made, people who I don't want to ruin anyone's dream here, but Fran's right when she says you're not really going to make a living unless your name's Stephen King or Grisham or something along that line. But I will tell you, for the business writers who are listening, in fact, and I'm an example of it, I do make a living off my books.
Right.
However, not off the royalty of the book. I make a living off of the opportunities and the doors that the book opens in business, and it establishes an author as a subject matter expert. And so, as a person who gives workshops, seminars, keynotes, I couldn't survive without the books. But it's not the royalties; it's the opportunities. And but that's for all you business people out there.
Almost every speaker has a book.
Hmm.
And of course, now what's happening is that almost every author is now teaching a class of some type, a 4 week class on how to sell your book, how to do whatever you want to your book. And that's a whole new direction also that many authors have jumped into. And if you're my age, you've heard all of these stories many, many times, but there are many want-to-be writers out there that do want to subscribe to this or buy a session. And so that's what, as I say, many writers and authors are now getting into. And that also becomes a full-time job for them.
Yeah, right, right. And with with the emergence of virtual, where we can bring in audiences from all over the country, if not the world, then it really makes it a little bit easier to field those audiences. Take it from a guy who's 31 years is delivering workshops. We call it bits, butts in the seats. That's the hard part. You can have, great message and a great book. If no one shows up and sits in a seat, you're not in the business. But all right, let's keep rolling. I'm curious about your writing routine. So, if there is one, what is it? I've got to believe there is one. I'm just curious how defined it is. So, what is a typical daily writing routine for you if it's daily?
Well, that's good. Good question. Well, at my age, I'm not dodging going to work or anything like that. I used to get up and so about 11 o'clock, I will decide that I want to go to my computer and spend about 3 or 4 hours. In fact, I did get in a habit of finishing this book going by the way the mailman came because I was sending material out and that type of thing on promoting the book. So I usually spend about 3 hours maybe writing on whatever I'm writing, whether it's a short piece or even working on a lengthier, I use the word novel. And then that's kind of it for the evening. I may come back and check my emails or check it on my phone or whatever, but I'm not a real dedicated person. Many people talk about that your writing as being a passion, but I sort of separate that between writing for a living and then writing as a hobby. And now I actually find that sometimes if I come back in the evening, I do something else completely different. Like I say, a flash fiction piece, which to me then it becomes therapy. So you
Right.
really depends on what writing is going to give back to you physically. I feel.
It sounds almost like writing is music for you. It's sort of like
Well,
you
sort of,
can
yes,
yeah, you
yes,
can go to it when you need to relax or you need, your
yes.
therapy. And other times you practice music, it's not necessarily relax. You need to practice. You need to get at it. So, but yeah, it sounds like music for you a little bit.
Well, and recently I've met people who are doing a poetry group, for instance. I've always wanted to be a poet, and but my skills as a poet have always been just to rhyme a couple of words here and there.
Yeah.
And I recently joined a Zoom group through the library, and we meet once a week. And I was sort of caught on to how many different types of poetry there are. I mean, I was writing sort of childlike poetry, but now for me, that's sort of it's writing, but it's an entirely new concept. And that's one of the other things that I think too many, and I'm going to say older people because I know hundreds of older people versus the younger set, like my granddaughters who are 22. But you really need to keep learning new stuff. You just can't sit there and say ho hum. And reading is also something that you need to keep doing if you're going to keep up with writing the way styles or people are reading are wanting styles of books to be written today. So anyway, is that a nutshell enough for?
That's a nutshell enough for me, and a really important and great point you made. Now, you wrote your bio, or I wouldn't have said your age, but you said it. So may I say it again?
Yes.
You're 87 years old and still evolving and still wanting to learn more and not saying, get off my yard. You're, you're saying, but what are you putting on the yard there? Uh, I agree with you. And I think people that are decades younger than you are losing that message. And so it's very credible that you're saying that right down to you are promoting your book. Fran, I can't tell you how many people I meet who seem to put everything they into writing a book and then fall asleep when it comes to promoting it. But you're making that an activity too. And hats off to you. Look, the Writer Center here in Bethesda, I offer a book marketing program. It's called Book Marketing on a Budget. And I'm only mentioning it because I have trouble filling that class with all those authors and not one program on marketing. We have trouble getting 10 people to want to hear about how to market a book. And here you are, okay, out there fighting for your book. I applaud you. But there's a question here. Tell me some of the ways that you promote it. You say you're waiting for that post office personnel person to show up. What are you doing to promote your books? I'm curious.
Well, very fortunately, Mary Edwards Walker came, as they say, almost found me. because she came back into the spotlight as Fort there at Richmond, Virginia. Fort whatever Hilt was renamed Fort Mary Walker, and she was also, her portrait is on a quarter. So I tagged into that, and I decided that, I heard somebody say that sometimes emails are like Teflon, they fly off people's desks. So, so anyway, I decided I would do a writing campaign, a physical letter campaign to all of the colleges, the libraries and colleges, the bookstores, the newspapers, and so forth in that immediate area. Also, she was born in Oswego, New York, and suddenly Oswego discovered her also. And so I was fortunate to tie in through writing and telephone. Don't forget the telephone. Pick up the telephone and call somebody. Don't wait for somebody to respond through email. So I called the
Amen.
bookstores and the libraries in Oswego and telling them about my book, following it up with a sales sheet and information. Also, I had a sheet full of, not endorsements, but praise from different sources.
Testimonials.
Yes, testimonials, right? Package that up, what is postage now, 54 cents or something like that. Anyway, I mailed up probably about 500 different addresses. I only got 3 back, would you believe? Anyway, it really paid off. Not that it's going to become a bestseller, but it is an evergreen book, and libraries were interested in it. And that's sort of how it began. Also, it was a time, by being set with the Civil War and the suffragist movement, which is still kind of going, I was able to place it with the centers, the visitor centers at like the battlefields, along where Mary Walker was America's first surgeon, and she began as a volunteer nurse at Fredericksburg and that portion of the Civil War. So all of those addresses that there, you can find them on Google. I sent material to, written material, because I figured, wow, they probably don't get that many as much junk mail as I do. But hopeful that they would actually read it and respond to it by placing an order for one book at a time. So that's sort of how I'm sorry to say that I found some of the older suggestions of sending out ARCs and stuff like that. That was not being productive. So anyway, that was my routine there, or my plan that I used to illustrate what was happening.
Good. But well, I wish I could bottle that and send it to every author, but you just heard somebody that is, and I use that term, fighting for her book. I think of my books, maybe I hope you do too, almost as those children or grandchildren. And we raise them. We work really hard on them. Now once they go out into the world, they're going to live a life of their own. But we give them every opportunity to do as well as they can in this world. Why aren't we thinking about our books that way? We need to do that. As I said, we've invested far too much time, energy, and passion in the writing and creation of a book. Do not, it's the marathon isn't over because you've got a publisher you published. You are halfway through that race at best. Fight for it. You'll be glad you did. And you mentioned I sent out 500. I got 3 responses. Yeah, well, that's 3 responses more than most of the authors out here.
Oh, I didn't mean responses. I meant, what do you call it when it doesn't get there and the mail doesn't get there and they return? Returns, yes.
Okay. I was I know mass mailing. See, if you send to a cold list, you're looking at about a 2.5% return. So I was sort of putting you on a cold list, but this is a warm list. This is your database, right? People that have connected with you. So yeah, you're going to hear more from them. But there's so many ways to promote a book. Pick one. I'm just saying, you can't pick the door that says, I don't want to do it. You got to do it. You got to grind it out.
Well, I'm sorry to say that I had not used my marketing skills, would you believe? On my first 2 books that I did right after my retirement from Virginia Commonwealth University. I dug a couple of manuscripts out of my drawer, and one was called Spirit Dog, which I published as an indie, and the other one was Escape to Freedom, Both of them hinge on using historical pegs. I don't know. I always found success, at least in writing children's stories, for denominational presses and also for other types of writing by using some type of a historical touch or information.
Right.
Yeah, so that way, but I did not apply all of these skills that I should have to them. And I think that's unfortunately what happens to a lot of people that do write indie. They don't follow through with learning how they can tie their story in with something that may be happening.
Bingo. Absolutely. And particularly if you have an opportunity to speak on your book. And I know that you've worked on, your talk, but just dropping in a reference from, I was looking in the Washington Post today and I saw this. I was driving my car, I saw a beech tree. I mean, whatever it is, it actually makes it more authentic to the audience. And it's just a more powerful message. And we're not asking for a whole lot here. You can still stick with most of your talk, but little pieces like that are valuable and an audience appreciates it. Believe me.
Well,
All right,
also,
I got one more question for you, Fran.
okay.
Nope. No, you go ahead. You had
I was
if Fran
going to
wants to
say
talk, we listen. Go ahead.
Another suggestion is a lot of people don't like to get into social media. Well, pick out there are so many other sites that you can sort of tie in with. When I say, like, for instance, the Civil War, what do you call it, an address or something like that. Sort of begin to work your Google and Facebook mentions and try and keep tying your title of your book into certain subjects that come up. Like right now is a good, right now with a few days left toward the election, that's a good time to tie in what Mary Walker said. She said to women, think for yourself. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing that people sort of get tired of doing or ignore doing.
Right. And you just outed us on a date. So by the time people hear this, thankfully, the election will be over. Yeah. So away we go. All right, I got one more question for you. Yeah. One more question for you, Fran. Tell me one thing you wish you had known when you started writing, way back when you started. If you could go back and visit, a young Fran who's starting to write, what's one thing you'd whisper in her ear?
Well, patience and perseverance. And when you're back there in your 30s and the 20s and whatever, you're very impatient. When I first started writing, I thought the most wonderful magazine to write for was True Confessions. I wanted to write True Confessions because they paid a lot.
Right.
And are also the Gazette, some of those different magazines like that. But they really weren't suited for my type of writing. So through the years, I've tried to stay patient and persevere. If something's not working out for you, get another type, turn it into like the lemonade thing,
Right.
If it's not working for you here, select something else that you can turn yourself, changing yourself,
Right.
And you almost always have to learn new skills to do that.
I agree. Well said. Well said. And you are a delight. I really enjoyed my conversation with you. How do people get a hold of you, Fran?
My email is FE as in Evelyn, Altman, Altman, at yahoo.com. And that's the best way. I do have a Facebook so you can see that most of my Facebook for the past 10 months has been to do with Mary Edwards Walker, but I usually respond to that also. Also through Maryland Writers Membership.
Good.
Directory.
Good. And do you have an Amazon authors page?
Yes, I do.
Oh, good.
And also one with Authors Den. And would you believe that my page is with Target and Walmart? They also have online bookstores. So I'm with them and just about every place.
Perfect. Look at that. She is out marketing just about everybody who's listening to this podcast right now. Shame on all of us. Let's get working. Roll up your sleeves. Fran's putting us to shame here. But Fran, terrific talking to you. Congratulations on not only just your success, but your ability to guide us through it. And anyway, I'm just glad to have had you on the show and really appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's guest author, we'd love you to rate, review, and share this episode with others. If you'd like more information on today's guest or the Maryland Writers Association, please visit our website at marylandwriters.org. You can also find out about the history of the Maryland Writers Association by listening to our first podcast, Episode 0.